Looking through the viewfinder and crossing the threshold of the unknown, we uncover stories hidden in plain sight. Experience the profound moments of discovery that altered the course of human history.
Quite the ride you got there. How's a guy like you end up with a $500,000 Lambo?
The same way anyone does, officer.
I bought it.
Bought it?
Huh? Must have been some payday.
My payday, my work, my money. This car is mine. Fair and square.
Officer Kevin Mercer, badge number 7294 of the West Side Police Department, saw a black man fueling a $240,000 Lamborghini Urus at a gas station and immediately assumed the vehicle was stolen or purchased with drug money. He pulled up behind the SUV with his lights flashing, approached with his hand on his weapon, and demanded to know where the man got at the car because people like you don't drive cars like this unless they're stolen or bought with dirty money. When Judge Samuel Carter calmly provided his registration proving ownership, Mercer accused him of using forged documents and threatened to impound the vehicle and arrest him for grand theft auto. What Mercer didn't know was that Carter was a state superior court judge who had purchased a Lamborghini with his own salary, that the entire confrontation was being captured by gas station security cameras, and that his assumption that a black man couldn't legally own a $250,000 vehicle would cost him his badge and result in a $10 million lawsuit. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. If you believe driving an expensive car while black isn't a crime and shouldn't be treated as suspicious, then like this video and subscribe. Judge Samuel Carter had worked his entire adult life to reach the point where he could afford the car he was currently fueling on a Friday evening in late October. At 52 years old, with 19 years on the state superior court bench and nearly a decade as a prosecutor before that, Carter had built a career on hard work, integrity, and careful financial planning. He lived modestly in most ways, saving and investing wisely. And 2 years ago he had decided to reward himself for reaching a career milestone. The pearl-white Lamborghini Urus, sitting at pump number 4, represented a dream he had held since he was a teenager working 2 jobs to pay for community college. It was fully paid for, registered in his name, and insured with coverage that cost more per month than some people's car payments. Carter loved that vehicle, not because it was expensive, but because it represented everything he had overcome and achieved. Tonight, he had just left the courthouse after a particularly long session presiding over a complex civil trial. He was still wearing his suit, though he had loosened his tie and removed his judicial robe before leaving chambers. The gas station was on his regular route home, a well-lit Shell station in an upscale part of town where he often stopped to fill up. Carter stood beside the Lamborghini with the fuel nozzle in the tank, watching the digital numbers climb on the pump display and thinking about the weekend ahead. He had plans to drive up the coast tomorrow. Maybe take the long route through the mountains, enjoy the car the way it was meant to be enjoyed. The evening was cool and clear, and the gas station was moderately busy with other commuters finishing their work week. Carter didn't notice the patrol car pull into the station until he heard the brief whoop of a siren and saw flashing lights reflecting off the Lamborghini's glossy paint. He looked up and saw a West Side Police Department cruiser parked directly behind his vehicle, blocking it in. A police officer was stepping out, and even from 15 feet away, Carter could see the aggressive posture, the hand resting on the weapon, the body language that suggested this wasn't a friendly check-in. Carter had been a prosecutor long enough and a judge long enough to recognize trouble when he saw it approaching. Officer Kevin Mercer had been patrolling the Western District for most of his 11-year career with the West Side Police Department, and he had developed certain instincts about what belonged and what didn't in the neighborhoods under his watch. When he drove past the Shell station and saw the Lamborghini Urus at the pump, his attention locked onto it immediately. Luxury vehicles weren't uncommon in this area, but something about this particular situation triggered his suspicions. He circled the block and came back for a second look, and when he saw that the driver was a black man in his 50s, Mercer's assumptions crystallized into certainty. A black man driving a $250,000 SUV meant one of two things in Mercer's worldview. The car was stolen, or it had been purchased with money from illegal activity. There was no third option in his mind. No possibility that a black man could simply be successful and wealthy through legitimate means. Mercer had 27 civilian complaints in his personnel file, 20 of them involving allegations of racial profiling or harassment of minority drivers in affluent areas. Internal Affairs had flagged his record twice, noting patterns that suggested bias in his stop decisions, but serious discipline had never followed. His supervisors considered him proactive, the kind of officer who didn't hesitate to make stops that other officers might avoid. What they called proactive, his victims called harassment. Mercer pulled into the gas station with his lights activated, parked behind the Lamborghini to prevent it from leaving, and stepped out with the confidence of someone who believed he was about to make a significant arrest. Carter watched the officer approach and felt his stomach tighten with a familiar tension. He had experienced this before, though never quite this aggressively. He kept his hands visible, one still holding the fuel nozzle, and waited for the officer to speak first. The officer stopped about 6 feet away, his right hand resting on his service weapon, his eyes moving between Carter and the Lamborghini with undisguised suspicion. "Afternoon," Carter said calmly, keeping his tone neutral and professional. "Is there a problem, officer?" Mercer didn't return the greeting. "That's a nice car, real nice. Where'd you get it?" Carter felt the question land like an insult, but he maintained his composure. "I purchased it. Is there something I can help you with?" "People like you don't drive cars like this unless they're stolen or bought with dirty money," Mercer said, and the words came out casual, almost conversational, as if he was stating an obvious fact rather than making a racist accusation. "So I'm going to ask you again, where'd you really get this car?" Carter pulled the fuel nozzle from the tank and replaced it in the pump, his movements slow and deliberate. He turned to face Mercer fully, and when he spoke, his voice carried the measured authority of someone who had spent 2 decades in courtrooms. "Officer, I own this vehicle. I purchased it legally with my own money. I'm happy to provide you with registration and proof of ownership, but I need to know the reason for this stop. Have I committed a traffic violation?" "Don't worry about why I stopped you," Mercer said, stepping closer. "Just show me your license, registration, and proof of insurance. And keep your hands where I can see them." Carter reached slowly for his wallet, narrating his movements in the way he had learned from representing countless defendants who had been stopped by police. "I'm reaching into my jacket pocket for my wallet. My registration and insurance are in the glove compartment of the vehicle. I'll need to reach inside to get them." "Do it slowly," Mercer ordered, his hands still on his weapon. Carter retrieved his driver's license from his wallet and handed it to Mercer, then walked to the driver's side door of the Lamborghini and opened it. The interior was immaculate, cream leather seats, and a dashboard that looked like it belonged in a private jet. He opened the glove compartment and pulled out the registration and insurance documents, then walked back to where Mercer stood and handed them over. Mercer examined the documents under the gas station's overhead lights, and Carter watched the officer's expression as he read the name on the registration and saw that it matched the driver's license perfectly. The vehicle was registered to Samuel J. Carter at an address in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. The insurance was current and valid. Everything was completely legitimate. This should have been the end of the encounter. A reasonable officer would have returned the documents, perhaps apologized for the inconvenience, and let Carter finish his evening. But Kevin Mercer was not a reasonable officer, and his ego would not allow him to admit that his assumptions had been wrong. Instead, he looked at Carter with even deeper suspicion and said the words that would end his career. "These documents could be forged. Registration papers can be faked. I think you need to come down to the station so we can verify this vehicle isn't stolen." Carter felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept it controlled, channeled it into the same cold precision he used when delivering rulings from the bench. "Officer, those documents are legitimate. You can verify the registration by running the VIN number. You can call the DMV. Everything will confirm that I am the legal owner of this vehicle. I haven't committed any traffic violation, and you have no legal basis to detain me." "I'll decide what legal basis I have," Mercer said, and his tone had shifted from suspicious to aggressive. "Right now, I'm investigating a possible stolen vehicle and possible possession of a vehicle purchased with proceeds from illegal activity. You're not going anywhere until I'm satisfied this car is yours." "On what evidence?" Carter asked, his voice rising slightly despite his efforts to stay calm. "I provided valid documentation. What specific evidence do you have that this vehicle is stolen or that I obtained it illegally?" "The evidence," Mercer said, gesturing at Carter and then at the Lamborghini, "is that someone like you doesn't own a car like this through legitimate means. Now you can cooperate and come to the station voluntarily, or I can arrest you for obstruction and impound this vehicle as evidence." At the next pump over, a woman filling up her sedan had stopped and pulled out her phone, recording the interaction. Inside the gas station convenience store, the attendant watched through the window with growing concern. Above them all, mounted on the canopy covering the fuel pumps, 3 security cameras captured every word and gesture in high definition, creating a record that would be played in courtrooms and news broadcasts and viewed millions of times online. Officer Kevin Mercer had just accused a state superior court judge of being a car thief and a drug dealer based solely on the color of his skin, and every second of his career-ending mistake was being permanently documented. Carter reached into his jacket pocket one more time, and Mercer's hand tightened on his weapon. "I'm reaching for my credentials," Carter said clearly. "I'm going to show you who I am, and then you're going to have a decision to make about whether you want to continue this stop." He pulled out his judicial credentials, the official identification that every Superior Court judge carried, and held them out for Mercer to see. The gold emblem of the state court system gleamed under the gas station lights. And in that moment, Kevin Mercer's world began to fall apart. Mercer took the judicial credentials from Carter's hand and stared at them under the harsh gas station lights. The identification was official, laminated, with a holographic seal that couldn't be easily faked. It showed Carter's photograph, his full name, his title as Superior Court Judge, and the seal of the state judiciary. Mercer's face went through several expressions in quick succession: confusion, disbelief, then defensive anger. He looked from the credentials to Carter and back again, as if trying to find some proof that what he was holding was fake. "This could be counterfeit," Mercer said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Anyone can make fake credentials." Carter kept his composure even though frustration was building inside him. "Officer Mercer, those credentials are real. You can verify them by calling the courthouse. The main number is public record. Ask for the Superior Court Clerk's office. They'll confirm my identity." Mercer handed the credentials back but didn't move towards his patrol car to make any calls. Instead, he seemed to be calculating his next move, trying to find a way to justify what he had already done. "Even if you are a judge, that doesn't explain how you can afford a car like this. Judges don't make that kind of money. Superior Court judges in this state earn approximately $195,000 per year," Carter said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I've been on the bench for 19 years. Before that, I was a prosecutor for 9 years. I've invested wisely, I live within my means, and I saved for years to purchase this vehicle. But I shouldn't have to explain my financial history to you. You stopped me without cause, accused me of crimes without evidence, and now you're refusing to accept legitimate documentation." The woman at the next pump was still recording, and she called out to Mercer. "Officer, he just showed you he's a judge. Why are you still harassing him?" Mercer spun toward her, irritation flashing across his face. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. Put that phone away and mind your business." "I'm recording it in a public place," the woman said firmly. "I have every right to document what I'm seeing." Mercer turned back to Carter, and his jaw was tight with barely controlled frustration. "I'm going to need to search your vehicle. Make sure there's nothing illegal inside." Carter shook his head slowly. "Absolutely not. You have no probable cause to search my vehicle. I haven't committed any traffic violation. I provided proof of ownership. You have no legal justification to continue this stop, let alone search my car." "I have reasonable suspicion based on the circumstances," Mercer said, but he was grasping now, trying to manufacture justification after the fact. "What circumstances?" Carter asked, and his voice had shifted into the tone he used in court when questioning a witness who was lying. "Be specific, Officer Mercer. What reasonable, articulable suspicion do you have that I'm engaged in criminal activity?" Mercer couldn't answer because there was no answer. His suspicion was based entirely on seeing a black man in an expensive car, and he knew that saying that out loud would end any remaining chance he had of salvaging this situation. So instead, he doubled down. "Step away from the vehicle," Mercer ordered. "I'm going to do a safety check." "That's not a safety check. That's an illegal search," Carter said. "I'm telling you clearly and for the record, I do not consent to any search of my vehicle." A second patrol car pulled into the gas station, lights flashing. A younger officer stepped out and walked over, taking in the scene with obvious confusion. The Lamborghini, the well-dressed black man, the recording witness, and Mercer's aggressive stance. "What's going on?" the second officer asked. "Back up," Mercer said quickly. "I've got a possible stolen vehicle situation here." Carter turned to the second officer, his voice calm and authoritative. "Officer, I'm Judge Samuel Carter from the Superior Court. I own this vehicle. I've provided registration and proof of ownership to your colleague. He's detaining me without cause and threatening an illegal search. I'm asking you to call your supervisor before this situation gets worse." The second officer's eyes widened when he heard the word judge. He looked at Carter more carefully, seemed to recognize him, and his expression shifted to alarm. "Sir, I think we should call the sergeant." "I don't need a sergeant," Mercer snapped. "I'm handling this." "With respect," the second officer said quietly. "If he's really a judge, we should probably—" "I said I'm handling it," Mercer cut him off. Carter pulled out his cell phone. "I'm calling my attorney. I'm also calling the courthouse security office, and I'm documenting every moment of this illegal detention." Mercer reached toward Carter's phone. "Put that away." Carter pulled the phone back and raised his voice for the first time. "Do not touch me or my property. You've already violated my Fourth Amendment rights. Don't add assault to your list of violations." The gas station attendant had come outside and was watching with a small crowd of other customers. The second officer looked increasingly uncomfortable, caught between backing his fellow officer and preventing what was clearly becoming a disaster. Mercer stood there, trapped by his own ego and his refusal to admit he had made a catastrophic mistake based on nothing but racial bias. The woman who had been recording spoke up again. "I've got everything on video, the whole thing. How he stopped you, what he said, all of it." Carter looked directly at Mercer and spoke with the cold precision of someone who knew exactly what was coming next. "Officer Mercer, you have one opportunity to end this now. Apologize, return my documents, and let me leave. Or continue this illegal detention and face the consequences. Those are your only options." Mercer's hand moved toward his handcuffs, and Carter knew the officer had made his choice. The worst possible choice, but the one his pride and his bias had led him to. And every second of what happened next would be captured on camera, preserved forever, and used as evidence in the lawsuit that would destroy Kevin Mercer's career and cost his department $10 million. Mercer's hand closed around his handcuffs, and the second officer stepped forward quickly, his voice urgent. "Mercer, wait. We need to call the sergeant, right now." But Mercer had gone too far to back down. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," he ordered Carter. Carter didn't move. "You're arresting a Superior Court judge at a gas station for the crime of owning a Lamborghini while black. Think very carefully about your next move, Officer Mercer." Before Mercer could respond, a third vehicle pulled into the gas station, this one an unmarked police sedan. A sergeant in uniform stepped out, his face showing immediate concern as he took in the scene. The flashing lights, the crowd of witnesses with phones out, the expensive Lamborghini, and two officers confronting a well-dressed black man. "What's happening here?" Sergeant Rodriguez asked, his voice carrying authority. The second officer spoke first, relief evident in his tone. "Sarge, this is Judge Carter. From Superior Court, Officer Mercer stopped him and there's been a situation." Rodriguez's eyes snapped to Carter, recognition immediate. "Judge Carter?" Carter nodded. "Sergeant Rodriguez, we've met before. You testified in my courtroom about 2 years ago, the Martinez robbery case." Rodriguez remembered. He had spent 3 hours on the witness stand while Judge Carter questioned him about evidence procedures. The judge had been fair but thorough, and Rodriguez had walked away with respect for his attention to detail. Now that same judge was standing at a gas station in handcuff range of one of Rodriguez's officers. "What happened?" Rodriguez asked again, directing the question at Carter this time. Carter's voice was controlled but carried an edge of steel. "I stopped to get gas. Officer Mercer pulled up behind me, blocked my vehicle, and immediately accused me of driving a stolen car, or one purchased with drug money. I provided my registration, insurance, and driver's license, all legitimate. He claimed they were probably forged. I showed him my judicial credentials. He said those might be fake too. He's threatened to impound my vehicle and search it without probable cause. He's detained me for approximately 15 minutes, based solely on the fact that I'm a black man driving an expensive car." Rodriguez turned to Mercer, his expression darkening. "Is this accurate?" Mercer's face flushed. "I responded to what I thought was a suspicious situation. The vehicle is extremely expensive and I had reasonable suspicion." "Reasonable suspicion of what?" Rodriguez cut him off. "Did you observe a traffic violation?" "No, but did you run the plates before you stopped him?" Mercer hesitated. "No." "Did you have any report of a stolen Lamborghini matching this description?" "No, but the circumstances—" Rodriguez held up his hand, stopping him. "You stopped a Superior Court judge without cause, accused him of being a criminal, refused to accept valid documentation, and threatened to arrest him. Is that about right?" The gas station had gone quiet except for the hum of the traffic in the distance. The witnesses were recording every word. The security cameras captured every angle. Rodriguez walked over to Carter's Lamborghini and looked at the registration documents that Mercer still held. He verified the VIN number on the dashboard matched the registration. Everything was perfect, legal, exactly as Carter had said. Rodriguez turned back to Mercer with barely controlled fury. "Judge Carter's name is in our system. He's listed as a judicial officer who may need courthouse security coordination. You could have verified his identity in 30 seconds. Instead, you chose to assume he was a criminal." Carter spoke quietly but with devastating precision. "Sergeant, Officer Mercer told me, and I quote, 'People like you don't drive cars like this unless they're stolen or bought with dirty money.' Those words are on that woman's video recording. They're on the gas station security footage, and they're the foundation of the federal civil rights lawsuit I'll be filing on Monday morning." Mercer's face went pale. Carter continued, his voice colder now. I've been a prosecutor and a judge for 28 years. I've seen officers like you before. You see a black face and you see a criminal. You see success and you assume crime. You had my registration showing my name and address in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in this city. You had my driver's license. You had my judicial credentials. And none of it mattered because you couldn't believe a black man could earn and own a $240,000 vehicle through legitimate work. He paused, letting the words land. I presided over police misconduct cases. I know the law inside and out. And what you did tonight violated my Fourth Amendment rights, constituted racial profiling, and represents exactly the kind of discriminatory policing that destroys community trust. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. Officer Mercer, badge and gun. You're suspended effective immediately. Mercer's hands shook as he unclipped his badge. Sarge, I was just doing my job. Your job doesn't include profiling judges, Rodriguez said sharply, or anyone else based on race. Carter collected his documents from Rodriguez, his movements deliberate and controlled. He looked at Mercer one final time. You saw a black man at a gas station and assumed criminal. That assumption just cost you your career. I'll see you in federal court, Officer Mercer. And this time, I won't be the one on the bench. He got into his Lamborghini, started the engine, and drove away from the gas station, leaving Mercer standing there with his badge in his hand and his career in ruins. The witnesses kept recording. The cameras kept rolling. And by morning, the video would have millions of views, and Officer Kevin Mercer would be the face of everything wrong with racial profiling in American policing. Officer Kevin Mercer was fired from the West Side Police Department 4 weeks after the gas station incident. The termination letter cited racial profiling, unlawful detention, violation of departmental policies, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Because he was terminated for cause, Mercer lost his pension after 11 years of service. He lost his health benefits. He lost everything he had built in law enforcement, and the viral video of him accusing a judge of being a car thief ensured he would never work as a police officer again anywhere in the country. The video had exploded across social media within hours of the incident. By Saturday morning, it had 15 million views. By Monday, it was being discussed on national news programs and analyzed by legal experts who called it one of the clearest examples of racial profiling ever captured on camera. The audio was devastating. Mercer's voice saying, "People like you don't drive cars like this unless they're stolen or bought with dirty money," played on loop across every major network, becoming a symbol of implicit bias in policing. Judge Samuel Carter filed his federal lawsuit 6 weeks after the incident. The complaint was precise and comprehensive, laying out violations of the Fourth Amendment, the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, and federal civil rights statutes. It detailed how Mercer had stopped him without cause, detained him based solely on race, and refused to accept valid documentation proving ownership. The lawsuit named Officer Kevin Mercer personally in the West Side Police Department, demanding $10 million in compensatory and punitive damages. The city's legal team watched the gas station security footage and read the complaint. They reviewed Mercer's personnel file and found 27 civilian complaints over his 11-year career, 20 of them involving minority drivers in expensive vehicles or affluent neighborhoods. The pattern was undeniable and indefensible. When they calculated the cost of taking the case to trial versus settling, the decision became clear. Fighting meant more publicity, more exposure of departmental failures, and almost certain defeat in front of a jury that would watch a police officer call a judge a criminal on video. The city settled for the full $10 million 8 months after Carter filed suit. The settlement came with a written apology from the mayor and the police chief, delivered personally to Judge Carter in his chambers. Carter accepted the apology but made clear that money didn't erase the humiliation of being handcuffed at a gas station while other customers watched and recorded. Kevin Mercer's personal liability was limited by the settlement structure, but his life had already been destroyed in other ways. At 40 years old, he was working construction and delivery jobs for hourly wages. His wife had filed for divorce 6 months after the incident, unable to handle the public scrutiny and the financial devastation. His 2 teenage children barely spoke to him, embarrassed by their father becoming a national symbol of racist policing. He had tried to find work in private security, but the background checks always revealed the gas station video, and no company wanted to hire someone with that reputation. The West Side Police Department underwent massive restructuring after the settlement. The police chief, who had failed to address Mercer's pattern of complaints, was forced to resign. New policies required officers to document specific reasons for vehicle stops before approaching drivers. All stops of luxury vehicles required supervisor approval. Mandatory bias training became quarterly instead of annual. A civilian oversight board was created with real investigative power. 7 other officers with similar complaint patterns were pushed into early retirement. Judge Carter used a portion of his settlement to establish the Carter Foundation for Justice Reform, which provided legal support and resources to victims of police misconduct who couldn't afford high-powered attorneys. He continued serving on the bench with even greater respect from his colleagues and the legal community. He still drove his Lamborghini, but now he carried multiple copies of his credentials and kept his dash cam running whenever he drove, a sad necessity that he wished wasn't required. The gas station footage became required viewing at police academies across the country, shown as the definitive example of how racial bias can destroy careers and cost departments millions. Instructors used it to teach officers what not to do, how assumptions can override evidence, and how seeing crime and black success is both morally wrong and legally catastrophic. 5 years after that October evening, Judge Carter was appointed to the state appellate court, one of the highest judicial positions in the state. Kevin Mercer was still working manual labor, still carrying the shame of being the officer who accused a judge of being a drug dealer, still living with the permanent stain of a viral video that would never be forgotten. The lesson remains simple and permanent. Wealth isn't evidence of crime. Success isn't suspicious. And when police officers treat black excellence as proof of criminality, the consequences can cost them everything, while the people they targeted continue to rise. Driving while black isn't a crime, and owning nice things while black isn't evidence of drug dealing. If you've ever been questioned about how you could afford something you legally own, share this story. What policies would actually stop racial profiling during traffic stops? Drop your real solutions in the comments. And if you believe black success should be celebrated, not criminalized, subscribe now. We're bringing you more stories where racial profiling met accountability and lost everything.
Archives do significantly more than just preserve the past. They softly whisper the intricate stories of our world. Each story is a necessary fragment of a larger truth. Thank you for choosing to seek that truth alongside our dedicated team.